So we can buy a company right now for $1 million in cash. And so a company for about $1 million right now, that company might be doing, let's say, 350, $400,000 in profit. So maybe two and a half, three times earnings. If we don't buy a software companies have much higher multiples. The amount of money that we have to put down to buy a company for $1 million is $50,000. So 50,000. We've
That's
more
5%.
5%. We've put more than 50,000 into those two venture funds that I've talked about.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yo, what's going on, fellas? How y'all feeling? How y'all doing?
Good, great. A little like maybe there were jet lag. I'm in Detroit right now. My
Oh,
girlfriend's
you
speaking
back home too?
Yeah, I'm back home. My girl's speaking at a conference. And she just spoke, and she has a few events. And then she figured, hey, I figured I'd come out here as well, see some family and friends. And so I'm feeling good. Just 3 hours behind or forward. I forgot what it is, but it's throwing me off a little bit. But what about y'all?
Nah, hold on. Before we move on, I just got to give you your props real quick because that is a kind of flex to be able to say, you know, my girl is speaking at a conference.
Yeah. She's yeah.
Hey,
Yes, yeah.
hey,
She's a
Yeah, I didn't even know.
psychologist,
I didn't know
therapist.
that. I thought y'all was just there for vacation because I was just in Detroit. So
Oh yeah,
we missed y'all. I wish we would have
yeah.
got it to link up. But yeah, I thought y'all was just there for like vacation. I didn't know she was speaking at a conference. That's dope though.
Oh yeah, not a vacation. It's kind of like we're mixing it a little bit. But I found that I've missed everybody. I missed Dre. I missed you. I think Dave's coming out here. One of my investors is going to be out here for a day or two. Like it's kind of interesting. Like Detroit is like you kind of pop in, pop off, especially if you have moved to another city.
how long you
Um,
out there?
till Sunday.
Oh, I got you. So just quick in and out.
Yeah, quick in and out.
Got you.
Yeah, I was just telling Brylan that like I was there for about a week, and I'm like, even after a week, I'm like, yeah, I gotta get out of
Yeah,
here. Like
yeah.
I can
You
only
don't
be there for so
you don't
long.
be missing home like?
I definitely miss it, bro. But it's like going back in time. Like
It's
it's like being stuck in
yeah.
the past, bro. It's like it's not even just the city itself, but even the mentality there is just kind of like it's just old. It's just outdated, bro. I'm like it's like I'm on a whole different software level, bro. It's like I'm on a future version. Everybody's still stuck back in the 2000s, bro.
It, it's the
Internet
combination.
Explorer.
And the Explorer. And this is
Exactly.
it's like it's a combination because like for example, my girl was laughing because we're in the MGM right now, but before that we were in the hotel for a conference. And I had the key card and I tried to like tap it and it was like not like I tried to like use it as it feels like that's not how it works. That's at these places anymore. So yeah. But yeah.
You know how Elon be talking about going to Mars, and going to these different planets. That's what it
Yeah.
must feel like for y'all when y'all go back to Detroit sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
Exactly. That's
but
exactly
great
what
to
it
see
is, bro.
family and friends if you can. I knew somebody that was there for 2 weeks. He was like, man, it was like he left after a week. He had to get back to LA. So
So
uh,
I'm curious because like, have y'all noticed that as y'all start to build out your lives in Houston, LA, and we're getting older, we're getting deeper into our careers,
100%.
um, that one are y'all taking less frequent trips to back home to Detroit, and then have y'all seen a decrease in the amount of time that y'all stay when y'all are home?
Hmm.
I
Yeah, for
guess we
me
still.
both. Oh, go ahead, Rodney.
Um, no, actually, you can go. You can go first, Trey. I have my thoughts, but you can go. You
Yeah,
can go ahead.
yeah, I would say for me for sure. Like this is the longest I had gone since I've been back. So
Mm.
had been over a year, and typically I was gone like a few times a year, like for holidays or like just popping in and out. But now I'm finding that I'm definitely not going as long, and I'm definitely not staying as long either. So yeah, it's not the same. But that could always change. Like maybe when I have like kids or something, because all my family is there. So I imagine when I have kids, I go back. It's more about like my kids getting time with the family. So maybe that might change it. But right now, I'm I'm in and out, man, and I'm definitely trying to limit how often I'm going for sure.
I would say I'm like Dre, where I'm in and out as well. I've pretty much gone to Detroit every single year since I moved to California. Generally speaking, most of the time like twice a year. Um, but yeah, I definitely don't do longer stays. Um, I don't do longer stays. And in regards to like what you said about just like growing older, I have been thinking about like, roots and whatnot and family and things like that of that nature. And, me and Jay actually were just talking, like a week ago about just like, pick your poison. There's no perfect city. And, that's, becoming more and more clear as I'm thinking more maturely about like where to settle down. And, uh, I wouldn't say I would settle on Detroit per se, but, I'm looking around and, LA has its cons, Houston has its cons, New York has its cons, DC, all of them. But they have their pros too. So it's just hard. I'm thinking about it all. What about you though? I know you're in the Midwest though too right now, Brylan, with Chicago.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it a stack. I've been back to Wichita, I want to say, since 2018, twice. Yeah,
Oh,
I
for
went
real?
back once for like 2 days. Yeah, I went back once for 2 days because like when the whole pandemics started, when I was considering moving to Atlanta, I was also considering moving to Wichita just because
Wow.
like, you know what? I can get me something nice probably for like 400, $600. And,
Yeah.
like I'd definitely be out of the way because there ain't nothing to do. So allow me to focus and then I can move. But ended up making a move to Atlanta. And then the last time I've been back was just when my dad had died. And so like I don't really have much left in Wichita, if I'm gonna be honest, because like even my
Hmm.
mom, she moved, out to Arizona, and my siblings moved out there. My little brother, he just moved back out there and got a crib and stuff, and so he's there. But yeah, I ain't shoot. That was back in 2021,
Hmm.
so it's been a minute.
That's really interesting. I always grew up with like all my family in Detroit, like both my mom's side and my dad's side. Although they both from the South, so they migrated like both sides of my family from the South, and they independently migrated to Michigan like decades ago. And so I grew up like always seeing my grandparents on both sides, always seeing my cousins, aunties, uncles, like everybody, like all the time. And so I assume like everybody was like that. Like, everybody's family is like concentrated in this one place. And so it sounds like your situation in Wichita is similar to like Nia's, where it's like she's from Ohio, but she don't really have any family there. Like all her
Yeah,
family's like spread out it's just kind of like spread out all over the place where mine is like all concentrated in one place. So
yeah.
yeah, it's just crazy to see the dynamics and how you grow up.
I
Yeah,
mean,
for
so
sure.
speaking of dynamics, man. I know one of the things that hit our group chat was the dynamics happening between Greenwood and the gathering spot. I ain't gonna
Yeah.
cap to you.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I did not expect it to hit TechCrunch because I had saw it, um, surfacing amongst Black Tech Twitter,
Yes.
and so it seems like it's kind of becoming this big deal. You want to break it down, Rodney?
So I'll break down what I know. There could be uh just a little um disclaimer. I don't claim to have all the facts around the scenario. However, I am a gathering squad member of Los Angeles. I also have met Paul Judge many many times, and the people who are associated with the deals and whatnot. As far as like Greenwood and Balance and the acquisitions. Um, and so look, it first started maybe a few days ago when I first started seeing like people talking about canceling memberships. All of a sudden I just started seeing like we're canceling memberships, things like of that nature. I didn't have any clue what was going on. And to be honest, I was never a regular gathering spot goer. I just got it because somebody told me, hey, look, get the gathering spot, get this membership. And I kind of just put it on autopay, but what I would do is I would probably pretty much show up. Um, for like networking, like if it was like a coffee or something, etc., to meet like somebody new. I thought it was a great ambiance for that. You know, there's more to it though than that. I know that there has been people like LeBron would show up to maybe like the one in Atlanta, other like so it had a cultural impact. But as so a couple of days as a couple of days went further, started learning a little bit more information, and essentially what it looks like is that long story short, um, nobody has the money. Nobody has the money. So what Greenwood is saying, per some documents, is Greenwood is saying, hey, look, we are not going to. So Greenwood, let me backtrack a little bit. Greenwood was supposed to uh, buy the gathering spot. There was an acquisition. It was involving, and by the way, Greenwood was the faces that come to mind are Paul Judge, Killer Mike, etc. It's supposed to be like this black banking, for us by us like a situation. And anyways, Greenwood bought the gathering spot, and they also bought Valence around the same time. And Valence is also a platform for like professionals to connect. I know them intimately, so I know the founders, Kobe, from being one of them. Our friends, obviously a part of our family, being our investors too. But they essentially Greenwood is saying, hey, look, Gathering Spot lied about their financials. They lied about their financials, and they're actually losing money. Now, the Gathering Spot is claiming that that Greenwood doesn't have, like, essentially doesn't have the money to pay, and they're also losing money. And the other try saying, hey, well, it doesn't matter what our scenario is, um, essentially, because you've lied about your financials or whether the business stands, we don't believe that we have to pay you anything. And so, to be honest, I'm still a little confused at the scenario, because it almost sounds like, hey, look, somebody who a company that doesn't have good financials will involve another business. And even by the way, these businesses are all centered around Black culture. That's something that's important to point out. Greenwood, uh, Valent, the gathering spot, typically speaking, were positioned in a way where they're for us by us. And so it's a little confusing in that regard, but essentially there's a conflict around there. I don't know how that gets resolved, because it looks like, um, it just looks like they're fighting over who gets money. W- Do you get money? Well, you lied about this. Well, we don't have the money, etc. It's not clear actually, and the story's evolving. But it did hit
Do
TechCrunch,
you know?
and that maybe added more air to it, because at first it was like maybe more like a Black Twitter or a Black tech Twitter conversation. Go ahead, Dre.
Do you know how much they acquired them? Do you know how much the acquisition was? I
I think it
never
was
saw
40 million.
any
I think it's 40 million. I think it was 40
Nah,
million.
nah,
Wow,
it was 50.
Mm,
Yeah.
Okay.
50
Okay.
So
million?
yeah, and so hold on. Let me jump in here, man, because
Go ahead.
I want to add some numbers so we can be very objective. But for those listening, Dre and Rodney knows when this acquisition happened. I was in our founder group chat, skeptical as fuck. I'm just gonna be
Yes,
honest with you. I was just very skeptical.
I
Um,
remember that.
and so I wanna lay out some of the facts that help paint a little bit of color, because I think Rodney, you summed it up really well. Basically, it's the truth is two companies that appear not to have no money, and it's like who's gonna pay who. And I think when you look at the facts, you really start to see that, like, damn, that may be the case. And so
Right.
yeah, like, so it was May 10th, uh 2022. It was announced that, they did the whole, I think they even had a billboard in Times Square or something. They had the whole Wall Street
Mm.
Journal, and the title read Greenwood acquires the gathering spot in joining of Black owned businesses. Like, so really, really pushing that narrative. And at the time we didn't know those numbers, but TechCrunch did confirm that it was a $50 million transaction. Now, the thing that surprised me at that time was specifically the numbers that were reported by the Gathering Spot at the time of the transaction. So it was reported that they have 12,000 paying members who are paying, $250 a month on average. And so if we do basic math, that means they're bringing in about $36 million in revenue. Okay. So that made me raise some eyebrows. I'm not even going to cap to you. But the interesting thing is, if you think about, okay, if they're bringing $36 million in revenue, they were acquired for, $50 million. That's only a 1.3x return. You know what I mean? Like make it make
So
sense.
so let me just comment on that real quick. So, and this is what I've been learning from about like private equity, at least how they do valuations.
Okay.
They don't do acquisition valuations based on revenue multiples necessarily. What they do it based on is typically is on an earnings multiple. So the Gathering Spot may have done 36 million,
36 million. That was
36 million in top line revenue. But then you got to consider like what the profit was. How profitable were they? Right?
So
Like
the
after
EBITDA.
all expenses, exactly. After all expenses and all that, like what was left after that? Let's just say it was 10 million, for example. By the way, I have no idea if this is the case, but
Yep.
let's just say it was 10 million. Then that's technically a 5x multiple, right? Because 10 times 550, right? Like that's a 5x multiple. So in that case, that may not be bad. So I guess
Okay.
you have to take the multiples into perspectives, but I rarely ever see like the revenue, like top line revenue being used in like when these real private equity deals take place. And in this case, this was a private equity deal because the Gathering Spot is a private company. So usually those multiples are on the earnings, not the top line revenue.
No, that's a great call out, and thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so the next thing that got me skeptical though, too, was so at the time, Greenwood had only raised $43 million. Their app was also still in development, like it wasn't live, anything of that nature. And so now that it's coming out that they acquired him for $50 million, with what money? You know what I mean? Like they ended
Yes.
up going on at the top of this year to raise an additional late last year at the end of November, they raised an additional 45. But at the time of the announcement, and kind of based off the public information, Greenwood only had an injection of 43 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so,
Yes. So that raises
like,
questions.
it's
'Cause even
so these are
even
just
in
the
the
numbers of the situation.
even in the document that I read, I think part of the deal was like maybe around like half was supposed to be in stock or something. So maybe it was going to be like 25 million cash or something, and then the other half in stock or whatever the case was.
Okay.
Regardless, irrespective of that though, the questions are still like in the air. Because even when you look at the TechCrunch headline, it's like, what is going on with Greenwood and the Gathering Spot? It's not like it seems like nobody exactly knows what happened here. But I see why you had why you were skeptical to begin with, Brylan. I can see that, like, I see it more clearly now than maybe before.
Yeah. No, I think the other thing that, like, even how this whole kind of dispute came to my attention was, I think somebody had sent an Instagram message or something in our group chat, but originally it was framed as, the Gathering Spot co-founder TK being replaced by the white guy. And I don't think it was publicly known that I can't remember his name, but the white guy, the white guy, he, had been with Greenwood for a minute. Like, even when we were going through acquisition conversations with them, like back when we started those conversations last October, he was already with the company, and he was strictly a part of Greenwood, where TK was, running the Gathering Spot, things of that nature. And so I think the Gathering Spot, it did end up putting something out on social that did clarify it up, that this was strictly a money issue and not a race issue.
it was interesting how, this whole dispute kind of, it started to play out. And I think one of the things that I've just been very curious about is you have Ryan on the gathering spot and side, and like I'll always be grateful for that relationship that we built because along my journey through Seventh Ave, like he provided a lot of guidance. And then on the other side, you have Paul Judge as well. Both of them. If you really think about over the last few years, have been moving very strategically when it comes to the media and building their brand in our community. And so now that I'm seeing like literally, like I said, this went from being just a Twitter issue to Axios, TechCrunch, the Journal, like you name it, all these big media players picking it up. It's like, man, which one of y'all are really like, how are they trying to play this from just a PR standpoint? Because I do think whoever culture gets behind, that's who's going to survive.
Right.
Well, isn't the acquisition already done? Like, technically, isn't it like closed? I mean, obviously they're suing each other, but I guess isn't the gathering spot technically a part of Greenwood? Like, aren't they already integrated technically now?
So the thing about that is, I'll never forget this. I think it was like 2 days after the acquisition was announced last year, Paul Judge and Ryan did a Twitter Spaces. And once again, there were some people that were skeptical of this acquisition. And on that Twitter Spaces, I remember specifically Ryan calling out that this was not a traditional acquisition. It was a strategic partnership framed as an acquisition. And so I feel like we truly just don't know.
I see.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Honestly, 50 million though seems like I mean, without knowing like the full numbers, that seems like a decent amount for the gathering spot. I mean, again, I don't know the gathering spot's numbers like that, but I mean, even if you look at WeWork, like WeWork has historically not been profitable, not been a good business. Like co-working in general has just not been a really good business.
Difficult.
There's just not many companies that have survived in that space. Yeah, no matter how you market it in terms of the culture or whatever, at the end of the day, the business model is a co-working business model. Like that's just
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, at 50 million, I don't know how much. Do you know if the gathering spot raised any money? Did they raise any VC money?
In the beginning, they did. They had a closed group. I think Cam Newton was a part of that group, and basically it was a lot of the. I don't know.
Okay. Well, depending on that, I mean, it could be a decent exit. I mean, I'm sure the founder walked away with millions, but yeah, I don't blame him.
He's supposed to walk away. He's supposed to walk away with. He's supposed to walk away with millions. The question is, like, where's the? I didn't. Based on the documents that I read, I'm not sure if he walked away with millions. Like that's part of the problem.
Wait.
Like,
so they said that
they shouldn't have to
never
pay.
got paid any of it because I thought you said
They're
some
saying-
of it was in cash. Some of the acquisition was in cash. Some of it in stock.
on
So
paper.
the cash
On
part,
paper.
he didn't get any. Like they didn't get nothing.
Greenwood is saying, look, we don't have to pay because you guys are wrong about your numbers. So I took that as they haven't got
Yeah.
anything.
They said the gathering spot faked their numbers.
So I took it as the founder
I see.
had
I
not
thought it
gotten
was
paid.
like a. I got you. That okay? Then that's a whole different case. I thought it was a case of like they had gotten some other they got some money up front, like maybe I don't know, a couple million or whatever it may be.
Maybe,
But there's like
maybe.
a remaining because what I saw in one article is that a portion of acquisition price was supposed to be earned through an earnout, so they're
Yeah.
supposed to get that over time. And so I thought like that earnout was the amount that was in jeopardy, not the whole amount. If it's the whole amount, that's a whole different that's a whole different case. And hopefully Ryan
Yeah.
has some good attorneys that can help.
Bro,
this out.
Ryan went to law school. He graduated top of the fucking Georgetown Law.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
still need an attorney. He ain't gonna represent himself.
No, he ain't gonna represent himself. But let me just say this: Ryan Wilson is Barack Obama in Atlanta.
Okay.
Paul Judge is up there, but and don't get me wrong, Paul Judge has done so much for Atlanta. But when it comes to the people, Atlanta ain't gonna let him lose, bro.
Wait. So you think the Atlanta people? Before we wrap this up, you think the Atlanta people are, and you live there, so I don't even know. I'm in Houston, whole different culture here. But you think the Atlanta people are more behind Ryan than Paul?
100%.
Judge?
Ryan's Ryan's roots are deep because it goes all the way back. I think it was either his dad or grandfather. Like he was very pivotal in the civil rights movement. I think like even Ryan even has it. Like, and he'll tell you that story. Like the Million Man March or whatever of Martin Luther King at the on Washington or whatever at the what's the big white thing in Washington D.C. You know what I'm where he gave that speech?
Yeah, the
Washington Monument.
Yeah.
Whoever that is, I can't remember if it's dad or if it's his dad or grandfather, is right next to Martin Luther King in that photo. And so his roots go so deep because he like that's why Ryan moves like that. He's really for the people. First, I will say Paul Judge has always been questionable amongst like many Black folks, especially the Black tech community in Atlanta, just because some of his dealings, even with the governor of Georgia.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So people have always kind of been skeptical. And I think there was a video that Isaac Hayes had put out around it. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm just curious to see, like, you know, in this world that we live in where, you know, affirmative action, you know, took a beating and that was perceived to be, you know, be an L for the culture. Is this going to be another L for the culture too?
This is already,
we shall see.
I would say as it stands right now, it is an L for the culture for sure. Too many Black founder and people, both those names have weight, especially in, you know, historically predominantly Black communities, and they're also tied into these larger these larger funds. What Paul did is also having his panoramic ventures, but also being backed by SoftBank, but then also, you know, like I said earlier, the Valence thing. Greenwood supposedly, you know, acquired Valence, and they're back. Valence is backed by and incubated in Upfront Ventures. So, you know, there's other people that was involved with that too. But as I see it today, it is an L as it stands today. Maybe it can get better, but it's already an L. Cause there's a lot of smoke and it's very, very unclear what is actually being said on both sides, but it's definitely a money issue. And I had no idea Greenwood even had a money issue. I guess always just looked at it like it came with the bank. For his bias, I personally don't bank with Greenwood, not because but just because, you know, just I haven't needed the bank, you know. But as it stands today, it's not good. But yeah, in other news though, or on a slightly different topic, I've been seeing the conversation around OpenAI and what people are saying is dumber or smarter. So a lot of the customers and or just users of ChatGPT are saying that OpenAI has made dumber models over the last few months. OpenAI has made it clear that they don't believe that's the case. Even I believe the VP of product, which I replied to on Twitter, had basically said, "Hey, look, objectively, we've made it smarter. What's probably happening here is that the novelty is worn off, and you guys can see more clearly what ChatGPT capabilities are." Which I think I wanted to let him know. I don't remember his name, but what I want to let him know is they're basically saying that the users are hallucinating. They're basically saying that, hey, look, we believe we've made the AI smarter based on the changes that we've done. And the reason we think you guys are seeing it that way is because the novelty is worn off. So actually, I didn't truthfully understand his position, and I made a tweet about that. It resonated with a lot of people in that community. But let's talk about that. Like, it's one of my suggestions. Well, it's maybe to make it easier for people to understand what you guys are talking about is have some sort of a rubric of what you guys are saying is smarter, because clearly everybody's not on the same page about what is a smarter model. And if a lot of people are saying this model is getting dumber or the reason capabilities were not as strong, then we need to listen to that and understand what's going on there. And maybe it's because OpenAI is simply judging it differently than users are. or paying customers are. And so, that's important to kind of like, speak to, in regards to AI and how they change models over time. Cause, it's not like a Google where like they're not necessarily, they change like what you kind of make the search results maybe, but, when you change a model's reasoning capabilities, um, it can drastically change outputs. And that can significantly affect, for example, especially people who are using it for coding, for example, because, they're expecting the same coding abilities that maybe it had in a previous model. So I just wanted to open the table to that and maybe see your thoughts on that and maybe solutions, maybe what OpenAI potentially do or how they should approach it. But as of
My-
today, a lot of people are, not sure. Oh, and by the way, people have came out with a lot of these studies. This conversation has forced people to come out with studies like, hey, look, we've been measuring it off this. Other people are saying we've been measuring it off that. And so now, they're almost saying they're standing up, like users are standing up for themselves and saying, hey, look, we've been measuring this. Here's our studies and our abstracts that are saying we tested it on these sets of questions, these sets of things. And we can see that it's not as strong and as smart. So what do you guys think about that?
Can I provide some context real quick? Because
Absolutely.
I had also saw that similar argument around the novelty kind of wearing off. But I think I think it's very important to provide just a little bit of context before so we can just kind of expand the conversation, because I think there's a lot of new understanding that us through this conversation, but also our listeners can just kind of gain around AI, because I definitely did as I dove deeper into it. And so the paper that I saw a lot of people starting to refer to, especially over the course of this week, came from, his name is Monte Saharia. So he's the CTO of Databricks. Like, he's a renowned, engineer, data scientist. He was the, creator of Apache, Spark, so he's really renowned in that space. And it was called How is ChatGPT's behavior changing over time? And one of the things that I've learned is that it's very important to understand the language that they're using in the title of these papers. Just because most of the time the definition in the AI world may be different than what we would expect that definition to be in like the Webster dictionary. And so when I looked this up, in the context of AI, capability and behavior are two distinct concepts. Capability refers to the ability of an AI system to perform a task or a set of tasks, such as recognizing language, et cetera, while behavior refers to what a user observes in terms of the response of an AI system, which is influenced by the capabilities. And so the reason why this distinction is very important is because I think this is a case where the VP, from OpenAI, what he is saying, there's a little bit of truth to it. And when I started to go through this paper and kind of, they were showing all the charts, and I think it was more terms like they were saying GPT-4 over the last few, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rodney, but they were saying GPT-4 has gotten more stupider, and basically, ChatGPT has got better. There was this really good blog post from some AI researchers that came out that really spoke about this and broke it out. And so what they said was, when it comes to a model's capability, what people have to understand is that's tied to pre-training. So ChatGPT, what we know so far is ChatGPT and GPT-4 have not been pre-trained. Like, the underlying data set that they've been pre-trained on has not been updated. New models have not been created of that. What they have been doing is fine-tuning, and that's related to the behavior. And the thing to understand about how a lot of these AI companies are fine-tuning is they're fine-tuning based off of, they're doing the whole, reinforcement learning, human feedback, which is just a cool way of saying they're tailoring it to human preferences. So these responses that are being given are supposedly supposed to be, close to what humans have said that they prefer. And I think what is happening is the underlying capabilities of these models, they either haven't changed or they are technically, quote unquote, I think they haven't changed. And when OpenAI is saying that they've gotten better, what OpenAI should be saying is they fine-tuned it based off of, to tailor humans' preferences. But what is appearing is these models are giving what humans actually want. And what this researcher did a really good job of breaking out was that behavior drifts, can be due to, the prompts that people are putting in. Because like you called out, if I'm fine tuning a model, that's probably going to end up changing, how I prompt engineer. That's probably going to change, if I'm doing context injection, which is just, adding, useful data into the prompt, things of that nature. And so I agree with you in terms of that problem, but I just wanted to call out that small nuance because I think when people were having this conversation, the conversation wasn't being had on common ground in terms of understanding how these researchers were using the words capability and behavior. And I think the issue is probably more related to how these models have been fine-tuned over time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's
That's a
actually
very good breakdown.
it's a very 100% great breakdown. And to be honest though, I expect OpenAI to do better when they talk to customers or like regardless of what level they're at. Because everybody's not going to have that deep understanding of AI. Like you can't come online and say, hey, we're making it smarter. Maybe what's happening is the novelty's worn off. Like, because what you're implying is that what people are seeing is like they're hallucinating or you're implying the wrong thing. Even though I don't believe they had bad intent, you're giving the wrong impression because yes, maybe the underlying data that's been trained on has maybe even better or expanded. But ultimately though, for example, one of the papers that was because there's been a few now, this is the conversation now. There's a few things. I can't necessarily reference exactly which one I was looking at, but one of the things they were saying was the safety alignment, right? Because they don't want people going on to say, hey, tell me step by step how to make a bomb, et cetera, and things like of those natures. Tell me how to do X, Y, and Z. And so they're trying to protect people. And then doing that, sometimes what's happening is it's not giving people the full access of the capability of the model. And which is ultimately, I guess what you're describing as the behavior is what people are seeing as a behavior change. A maybe more simple version of this would be outside of OpenAI. I forgot what company it is. Maybe it's a character AI or whatever that company is where people have those girlfriends, those online girlfriends.
Oh,
Or
yep.
They often find that when they do a model update, their quote unquote AI girlfriends have completely changed. And so I think that's what people are just speaking to is that you can make these changes over time to improve things. But for example, in the case of somebody who has an AI girlfriend, mind you, obviously, I don't know much about that. I have a real life girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? No knock to people who are in the future. But what I'm basically trying to get to is that there are changes that are happening that completely throw a user off. And now they have to almost relearn how to use it. And then also too, again, when you have these safety and alignment things, it's just a challenge. It's just a challenge because you're trying not to allow people to do things that are very harmful to themselves or other people, and which may unintentionally limit some of the actual full capabilities of the model, which is one of the reasons why people like local models, for example, that are uncensored, and can, answer and just, they don't care. They're not fine tuned, so they can just answer to the full capabilities that they've been trained on. And so it does get very nuanced. But I think OpenAI, especially like the VP of product and anybody that on that side, I think they need to stop to should try their best to stop speaking in a foreign language and speak more to their customers and talk as if they're listening to their customers more.
So let me ask this question to both of y'all, because in our group chat, we frequently are sharing, the different updates. I think, Rodney, you shared one recently around some of the changes that they're making to, ChatGPT, just to allow people to kind of have more control and steerability over kind of the output. Now, they don't make those kind of updates when, they fine tune the model, right? AKA change, like, let's just call it what it is. They're changing the model's behavior. Do you feel
Sorry, bro.
in the current, what are y'all thoughts? Around like, should they be updating people as they fine tune in real time? Like, would that potentially kind of help solve this? What
Are they not doing? Does that not happen today? Because I know they have a blog. I don't read their blog, by the way, not that frequently.
On the blog, no. It may happen in the forum, but I'm not a part of the forum or Discord anymore.
This will not happen today. Like they're listening, or
them making these announcements that, like, hey, this week we fine tuned, and basically being transparent around, like, when they're updating, fine tuning their models and updating the behavior.
Potentially, but I think, but then I think you have to ask the question of, like, is that I guess, are you asking, is that a corporate responsibility? Because if that's the case, then I think you zoom out for a second and ask, like, well, then should Google do the same thing then, right? Should Facebook do the same thing? Should some of these other companies do the same thing when they make these changes? Because one could argue that a newsfeed algorithm changed by Facebook can have real
yes,
implications.
yes,
And be, can have
yes,
terrible outcomes compared to,
absolutely.
A model change in ChatGPT. And not saying that they shouldn't communicate it, but again, if we're asking a question about just corporate responsibility, when you have deployed such a useful and dependable technology, should you communicate like some of those broader changes? Then sure, I can see that being a topic of conversation. But if it's just strictly related to like OpenAI, then I don't know, because in that case, Google doesn't do that. They don't necessarily let you know when they update the search rank algorithm necessarily, right? Facebook doesn't let you know necessarily when they push a big change to newsfeed. So I don't know.
This is where I give the credit, though. I do give OpenAI credit for being more to being different than actually Microsoft and Google and Facebook, where like if the Instagram or Facebook changes the algorithm, they won't say a word. I give credit to Twitter where they're opening up the algorithm where we can read it and whatnot. So I give them credit for it even being out there. I'm just describing maybe more so the feedback. Like I said, I don't think the intent was wrong, but I do think that if you are going to be out there, because the thing is, Google is not explaining anything, so I have nothing to speak on because they're not, they're not explaining it, but if OpenAI is coming out and they are trying to have conversations with the community, they need to listen to the community. If you're going to do it, then listen to the community. And, and I think it's just as simple as, being, at least the start, it's as simple as being more transparent about what is changing and why are you guys saying it's smarter? Because all of Reddit saying it's not smarter. A large portion of the Twitter, ecosystem and in the AI saying it's not as smart. So where is the disconnect? And I think that if there was more transparency, maybe, again, they're choosing to come out to the community, and because they're doing that, I'm saying, okay, well, since y'all are choosing to do this, then hey, like, listen to what people are saying, and because we're not like most people are not deep in the AI technology and they don't know what reinforcement learning is, but if they've been asking it coding questions and suddenly that same code or when the code doesn't run, and it's that before they could expect it to run, but now they can't. It makes it a little unsettling as far as like, can it depend on it? Again, though, to a certain extent, though, people should tailor their expectations, because what people do fail to realize about ChatGPT is that it's still a research preview. It's still a development type of like tool that's not necessarily meant to be like extremely relied on because they're moving fast and they're changing things fast. And it's not necessarily like not changing, so there is some expectations that I think users need, but yeah, but not to speak down
I see.
on them. Yeah.
li- I see this problem all the time. Well, I used to see this problem all the time, like when I was a PM, which is like what you have is you have a group of engineers that are trying to explain some shit to
Yes.
non-engineers. And
Yeah.
going back to what you said, Brylan, it's a misalignment of just definitions. You know what I'm saying? Like users of the product that are using it are probably not engineers. They're probably not technical people. So those deep nuances in terms of definition, I think while they seem small, I think are incredibly critical in bridging the gap between the users and the company, because the company could very well be listening, but the problem is they may not be articulating the information in a way that can be easily understood. But they could very well be listening. But if the end user can't understand the language that's being said, then you might as well not even respond at all, because
Yeah.
it is going to fall on deaf ears. And so I think that's where like it just needs to be a little bit of a bridging of the gap. And that's where, people like us can come into place where we can, take that technical language and translate it into something that's simple to understand.
Nah, 100%. And like, I guess the last thing that I'll say on this, I think it's quite convenient that people started talking about that around the same time when, Meta made their announcement with Llama 2 this week.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we don't have to go into the details of Llama 2, but I think that the thing that I do want to point out is Meta was 100% transparent. Like, they released the model weights, like they released literally they broke down gave the whole data set, like told you exactly how they were doing reinforcement learning. Like, everything was extremely clear. Like, everybody, you had the information to make an informed decision. You know what I mean? And I think this qualm that people have brought up with Chat GPT and kind of just OpenAI right now in terms of, the discrepancies that people are experiencing, my bet is you will continue to see that argument grow. Not only with Chat GPT,
Yeah.
I feel like people are going to start saying the same thing of Bard. I think people are going to start to say the same thing of Claude. Any closed source kind of like API AI, people are going to want to understand, how are you making these things quote unquote smarter? How are the behaviors changing? And I wouldn't be surprised if the folks over at Facebook are strategically thinking about how do they exploit this.
Well, I guess we're gonna wait and see. It's interesting to see what Meta is doing. I guess they learned from being spanked on the hand by the government for the whole election stuff. So
Yeah.
that's very smart on Meta's part to be transparent. But switching gears real quick, speaking of transparency, Brylan, you shared an interesting article in our group chat around VCs, around the road of venture and the lack of profitability in the space. And I swear, if you just an observer on tech Twitter, you would think every VC, every angel is fucking hitting home
Talk
runs
about it.
and killing it, like returning
Yeah.
crazy numbers, like
Yeah.
just getting the bag for real. Like you would assume that, right? Like the average VC kind of gives that aura. At least, even if you jump on a Zoom call, they're gonna tell you
Of
about the
course.
fund, how much they raised, who they bagged,
Yeah.
all this shit, right? But when we really look at the real numbers, the real raw returns from these funds, it's a whole different picture. And so, yeah, can you go into, I guess, how did you even come across this? And what I guess any light you can shed on what you've conclusions you've come to now that you're a little bit closer to the VC world than I am.
Yeah. I'll go through it really quickly, but I came across this on LinkedIn. I've been using that platform a lot more than Twitter recently. But it just aligns with a few weeks ago, I read this report that came from the Texas A&M endowment management company. And they were just talking about some of like the average, returns that, these VC funds, were making. And I wasn't even really hip to the math behind VC. So I've learned more about like DPI. And so for people out there that don't, know that terminology, that's distributed, capital to paid in capital. So how much money did they actually return to their investors versus how much was actually paid in? There's the IRR, which is, a measure of just kind of like, the growth. And what that document concluded was that, the average DPI for most firms was 0.25x. Think about that. So for every dollar that an investor gave a VC, on average, a VC was only given 25 cents of that back, meaning they lost 75 cents of that. That's very important. And so when I had read this article from TechCrunch, it just pointed out that 5% of VC firms return more than 3x. And the reason why this 3x number is important is because LPs, typically, which are pension funds, endowments, hospitals, things of that nature, they make these investment decisions in relation to, other asset classes. So they have to take into consideration like bonds, which is really, the kind of like the risk-free asset class, and then like the stock market and things of that. And so their expectations typically are, 12%, 12% annually return when it comes to that. And so if you play that out over the course of a lifetime of fund, that equates to about 3x. But literally 95% of funds don't return that expected value. That's kind of what it spoke to. And it broke down the math. And at the end of the day, it's just very hard. It's very hard. And so that gave me empathy for folks that are in venture. Because even like, say, for example, like going back to how we were talking about a $50 million, outcome for the gathering spot, right? Whoever those investors were, most likely, depending on the size, that's the important part. Depending on the size of their fund and their ownership target, that potentially was not a good return. But the thing what I'm learning is investors are incentivized to kind of, go to their own horn, because hopefully that leads to more deal flow. It shows that they have a track record of, exits. And over the last few years, really over the last decade, kind of even what I'm learning too is a lot of these firms, just off their track record, not their returns, are able to go raise fund 2, fund 3, and things of that nature. And so, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an expert on VC. But as I learn more, private equity just in general is a world where I feel like as founders and as operators or anyone that is looking to get into that founder game, you really need to study and learn more, because it's a very interesting business. And I feel like the more information that you equip yourself with, the better you can handle those conversations when you are fundraising and, negotiating in terms with venture as well. But Dre, I know you had some thoughts on this because you've been going down the rabbit hole as well.
Yeah, no, man. So first off, I'm a LP in 2 different venture funds. They're both early seed stage funds.
LP, let's not assume. Remember, we were just talking about translation. Let's not assume people know what that is.
Yeah. So I'm essentially a limited partner in a fund, and I have pulled together with some other friends of mine capital to invest in a venture fund, and then that venture fund, I just use one of them as an example. I won't say the name, but one of those venture funds, they are slated to invest in about 30 different companies over the next 5 years. That was the initial plan. It's a 10-year fund. And half of the capital, about half of it will be deployed as like new fresh checks that they'll write into a company. And the remaining half of the fund, I think it's like a $25-30 million fund. The remaining half of that fund will be used for subsequent follow-on rounds so that they don't dilute their ownership stake too much. So
What stages? Like, yeah, what's their kind of like high level strategy?
all I would say seed, pre-seed, seed, and then some will do the follow on into the Series A. But that's it. Like they're very early stage, and so the reserves that they do have is to hopefully go into the Series A, so that again they can try to maintain whatever position or increase the position. Obviously, if the company's performing well, and so yeah, I'm an LP in both of these funds, and what I will say is it's very interesting because one, obviously, we have gotten no distributions from either fund, but two, what I've paid close attention to is how these funds articulate how the fund is performing itself. So what I look at is how the actual fund managers represent and talk about the funds. And what I've noticed is it's all paper shit, right? Meaning like to them, a successful update is this company went on and raised, a $5 million seed round, and they're doing X, but of course they're not profitable or anything like that, right? Like they're not profitable. They're still trying to get product market fit, but they raised $5 million, and that's good for them, right? In terms of what's on paper. And so they'll look at that and then mark up whatever their initial investment was. Let's say it was 100,000, 200,000, and be like, oh, we're up, 30x or 40x or whatever the case may be. But that's obviously not the real reality because it's just all on paper. And so, yeah, that's what I've learned is that, like, first of all, like to really learn if you're actually good at venture, you have to do it for a long period of time. Like, it's not something that can just happen in 4 or 5 years. It's not even about the companies that you invest in. It's really about the exits. And so that just takes time to really see. And so, whenever I see like these like venture guys on Twitter talking and they just started a fund 3 years ago, I'm like, if you're not familiar with the space, then you will look at that as like, oh, they're experts, like they're the Sequoia. But the Sequoia's been around since the fucking 70s or 80s. Like they've been around that long. You know what I'm saying? Like Sequoia didn't just pop up in the early 2000s. Like they've been around for decades. And so that's that's what I take away from that. But I want to mention something real quick on the private equity side because I've been diving more into that role. So one of my boys actually, him and I were investing in these venture funds together, and we were looking at another venture fund. He was like, bro, I'm be honest with you, I'm not trying to do any more like startup investments. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because this is way too risky, takes too long to get cash, blah, 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 blah. But he was like, but I've been looking into this game of private equity. And I'm like, well, what the hell is private equity? And he was like, man, well, so we've been basically pooling our money together, getting like SBA loans and using the SBA loans to acquire existing businesses, right? So, we might look at a business that's doing 300,000, 400,000 in profit. Maybe that business might be selling for 900,000 or $1 million, so like 3-4x, whatever the profit earnings are. But the business could be doing $3 million in revenue, but they may not be, $3 million in profit. And so, we pool our money together. We go and get an SBA loan, just like you would go get a house loan or a car loan, or whatever, and you apply leverage to it. And so,
what's that process for getting an SBA loan? Because I ain't even going cap. I ain't heard any of this. So this the game we need, man.
I'm about to tell you. So I'm actually going through this process right now. So, I like to think about my life as a video game, and sometimes you got to do side quests. So this is a side quest that I'm on right now. So me and my boy came together and we're like, hey, let's acquire a business together. So the first thing we started doing was looking at companies. I'm like, all right, we can't just start there. We got to put together a thesis and, put together what we want.
Where were you looking?
So we started looking with different business brokers. So like Biz Buy Sell is like one of the largest business brokers. So they're a business broker, but there's tons of business brokers all over where businesses that are looking to sell will go to these brokers and say, hey, I'm looking to sell my business. Help find me the right strategic buyer so that I can sell my company. And some brokers specialize in certain types of business acquisitions. Some specialize in manufacturing. Some specialize in digital marketing agencies. Some specialize in SaaS companies. Some specialize in service businesses. Like there are different specialties, and some do all of it. And so basically we started building relationships with some different business brokers. And then we started building relationships with business lenders. And so the way the SBA works is the SBA essentially provides a guarantee to banks who want to lend money to folks like myself who are looking to acquire an existing business. So they basically say, hey, we'll guarantee this loan that you're going to write to this business, this holding company, up to 80% or something like that. And so it is an incentive for banks to go out and write loans. Same thing they do in the mortgage industry. with, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, same thing. So what we did was we started building relationships and with these lenders, and we went through the process. And actually, we just got some funding secured. And when I say funding secured, meaning like they have essentially agreed to back an acquisition if we bring one to them, and obviously if it vets out properly, up to $1 million, right? So we can buy a company right now for $1 million in cash. And so a company for about $1 million right now, that company might be doing, let's say, $350,000, $400,000 in profit. So maybe 2.5, 3 times earnings. If we don't buy a software company, software companies have much higher multiples, and I can talk about that in a little bit. But and the amount of money that we have to put down to buy a company for $1 million, bro, is $50,000. So 50,000. We've put more.
That's 5%.
5%, bro. We've put more than 50,000 into those 2 venture funds that I've talked about. So think about that, right? Like we've dumped tens of thousands of dollars, $100,000+ into 2 venture funds that we may not see no return on for 10, 15 years. Hell, we may not ever see a return on it. Or, now we're going down this private equity route where we can take that $50,000, acquire a business, today. A business is already doing $300,000, $400,000 in profit. The business could be doing $2-3 million in revenue today. That already has a team, already has customers, already has everything in place. And so the way that you can apply leverage in the private equity space is incredibly fascinating. And I think it's this hidden world that you don't know unless you know. And you really don't know unless you really know people who are in it, because there's so much to it. And bro, like you can buy companies doing millions of dollars in revenue and in profit and put no money down on it. 0, which is crazy to think about, right? Or you take the risk and like start something from scratch. And so again, I think founders should consider the path, consider the options. And y'all always heard me be an advocate for like acquiring businesses. But now that I'm going down this path, this journey, I'm just seeing like, you can get crazy leverage. And then the cash on cash returns on these investments is insane sometimes. Like there's another guy that I know who's doing the same thing in storage units. He's buying self-service storage units, acquiring them, existing ones. He's doing 30% cash on cash returns a year. That means he's making 30% returns on his capital every single year. It's just in self-storage units. VCs, in the article I read, it said 12% was considered success. This is double that. So it's just a whole nother world. I'm gonna stop there. We can do a whole little deep dive on it, but I'm learning a lot about the world of private equity, and it's definitely a way to compound wealth pretty quickly relative to some of the other paths that I've seen.
So hold on. I want to say this because you're really going crazy.
Hold on, Brylan.
Go ahead.
Real quick. Dre, give me involved in some of these conversations. As far as like how some of this works. I appreciate you sharing. It sounds like a very good potential avenue. I've been seeing SBA loans floating around, and I see it, and I've seen, but I haven't really dived into that. It's very intriguing. Keep me posted.
Yeah, for sure.
What he said.
Bad, bro.
But I want to call something out.
Yeah.
No, hold on. Rodney, is Drake giving us, Robert Smith vibes? Because this was literally, think about it. This was around the same age that Robert Smith started getting into private equity. And correct me if I'm misunderstanding Vista and kind of what you're doing as well in private equity, but it seems very similar.
Very similar, bro. It's the exact same thing, bro. Like you buy and restructure private businesses. That's all private equity is. And the way you do it, bro, can be so creative in financing. You got people in private equity that can even buy failing businesses and make money off of them. Like you can make money on a declining business. Like a business is going under, going bankrupt. People are literally making millions off of those. And it's like, how the hell do you make millions off of it? It's all about how you structure financing. And so it's a whole world to how to structure financing on deals where, bro, people printing money and not even having to move it.
So I got a few questions I want to ask. Just because when you threw out this 30%, I had to open my rule of 72 calculator just to see how often this bitch is doubling. At a 30% annual rate, that means every 2.5 years, the money is double. Y'all, like, for the listeners out there, you got to really understand how crazy that is, right? Say on average, what the stock market is anywhere between like 8 to 12%, right?
Yep.
That means every 9 years, the money that you are putting into the stock market is double, right? And so obviously, you know, we know with bigger rewards comes more risk. Yeah, just in the context of just, you know, let's just keep it simple in terms of the context of private equity, venture, and kind of like the stock market. What's the risk profile of private equity in these businesses that are being bought up?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it comes down to like the team, right? Because in our case, we can succeed in this space because we are operators and we've operated businesses, right? And so I'm not coming off the street like just trying to jump into this thing. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't know anything about this, you know, if you don't know anything about operating a business or whatever, then you should go the safe route, which is put your money in index funds. And by the way, I'm not giving people financial advice, but that's what I would say. Go into index funds, just go the safe route, right? But in my particular case, because I do have like operating experience within a business, for me is I see the risk significantly less than the current startup that I have. Because in the case of the current startup I have, I'm trying to get to product market fit. I'm trying to prove out a business model. I'm trying to raise debt financing and essentially leverage up the business to get it over the hump, right? To the point where it can be self-sustaining. In the case of private equity, that hump is already over the hump, right? The business is already over the hump. And so you can drastically reduce risk because you're acquiring an asset that's already generating cash flow that is profitable and has a record and a history of doing that. Whereas a startup, I'm only 2 years old, so there's no record, right? And we're looking at companies that are 10 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. So there's a little bit of a history there. And so, yeah, I would say that's the difference. And the last thing I would say is you mentioned Vista Equity Partners, fantastic company to look at. Another company, and I've mentioned them on the podcast before, is called Constellation Software. And what they do is they purchase vertical SaaS companies, for those that don't remember. And they typically buy really small vertical SaaS companies. They started doing this in 1995. And then they went public, I think, in 97. Their stock has gone up over 3,500%. They have compound. Right now, Constellation Software, they buy hundreds of software companies a year for like $1 million to $5 million. So very small acquisition prices. Right now, Constellation Software does $1 billion in free cash flow every year. Profit. This shit is growing 30%, 30% a year. All their shit is public. It's public financial, so you can look at it. $1 billion in free cash flow every single year they get in. Crazy returns. So in terms of risk profile, I think it's way more de-risk in my opinion, because hey, you got a business that's working, you got long-term customer contracts, you got a market that's already proven because you're acquiring a company that's already operating in the space. And so when I think about everything that a startup is trying to prove out, this is the anti of what a startup is doing because it's already proven in these businesses. And again, it depends on how you do private equity. There is a way to do it where you're buying these businesses that are going downhill, but that's not the way we're going. We're buying existing businesses that are actually performing really well. And so, yeah, the risk is much lower.
I like that. I like how you phrase that. And even, and like Chris said, we're not even on financial advice, but one thing I would say is that for everyone to keep in mind, in regards to building wealth, there are many other ways to build wealth, and startups are a very, very, very risky way to build wealth. And take it from three venture-backed founders here, who are speaking to the experiences of that,
Right.
the realities of that. We've all raised millions of dollars, and we're looking, to continue to do that. But the vast majority of startups, it's the minority of startups that win. And you can do everything right in a startup and still lose. So the risk profile for a startup, even for the excellent, is still extremely high. Whereas Drake basically has just described where, you can be a lot more selective and have your operating experience, to an already pre-existing, company or business that has gotten over a hump, which is a lot different than, for example, getting something from 0 to 1. But yeah, you do have to have some insurance cap. So obviously that there's a risk there. I think stocks probably seem like one of the safest things, but obviously we know those that can get a little that can get risky too, depending on how you play that game. Especially with options and trading and stuff like that. But yeah, thanks for that private equity piece. We that's a part of that's more something that I say I'm a student on. I don't know much there.
Yeah. I definitely got my student hat on with that too. I ain't even gonna count. We need more of that. We need more of that because folks ain't getting that kind of knowledge, and I think part of the reason why folks ain't really hearing about what's happening in that world is because it ain't sexy. It ain't shining. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
definitely
The
so.
way,
Yeah.
like you said, the way the VCs or the founders make it seem on Instagram or Twitter.
That's sort of,
But
yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
one
Part of the
last question
game.
I have, and then we can kind of, part of the game. One last question I have before we just kind of wrap up is, for you, Dre, is, I just pulled up some quick generational, wealth break, stats, broken down, and it's like baby boomers, they have $60 trillion of wealth, so 53% of it. They also Generation X, they have 30% of the nation wealth, and so us millennials and even Gen Z still have very little wealth. And obviously that wealth is distributed across a multitude of different asset classes, but like businesses are a huge piece of that. And so I guess like my question is these going back to the teams, and the owners of these businesses, are you seeing them kind of geared more towards like the older kind of generations? Are they in the life stage where maybe they're looking to retire and kind of looking to get the business off their hands, or are these younger people who are quickly growing these businesses and looking to just kind of flip it? What are the natures of just the people selling these businesses? Have you seen? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And from what I see, it is a lot of older people who are gearing up for retirement. So I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but it's some like crazy amount of wealth that is expected to be transferred from some of these baby boomers that are retiring right now. So for example, like my in-laws and my parents even are getting to the age where they're getting ready to retire. And for some of those folks, they own businesses that they've owned for a while and are doing very well, whether it's a plumbing business, roofing business, cement business, digital agency, whatever it may be. They own these companies and then they get ready to retire and nobody wants to take it over. And so, yes, that's exactly what I'm seeing, because we're specifically looking at businesses that are a little bit more mature. And so we're not looking for ones that were just started 2 years ago or 3 years ago. We're looking at 5, 6+ years of operating experience. And sometimes, even longer than that. And so, yeah, it's definitely the older people. And I again, I suspect a lot of these older people are sitting on phenomenal businesses. So like when I say to the core are great, highly profitable, high margin, long-term contracts, like trust, all of those things. They just don't know how to scale it properly, or again, they're at the point where they just have done everything they can do. And so they're looking for folks like me just like coming in and rolling these up and can, take it to the next level. So that's what I'm saying.
Now, I appreciate you breaking that down.
Awesome.
Yeah, this was a good
Awesome.
episode, guys. So we should wrap
Absolutely.
it up, and we'll see you.
Absolutely.